Hello and welcome to the big picture. There's some good news on the economy front. The wholesale price index has touched a new low in the past 5 years, while the consumer price index has also come down. Inflation, which has been one of the biggest problems for some years now, which also hurt the UPA government badly, is now softening. The low and stable inflation rate, which is a requirement for stability and growth, is now being promised by the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. The lower inflation has also been backed by drop in prices of petrol, and diesel is likely to follow soon. All this has raised hopes of better economic growth in the coming months. However, is this low inflation going to stay? What are the reasons for the lower inflation? How is it going to help spur economic growth? And is it sustainable? We will discuss all this today with Professor N.R. Bhanumurthy, member, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, Professor Surajit Mazumdar, Center for Economic Studies and Planning at the JNU, Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, Senior Journalist and Economic Analyst, and Dr. Arbind Prasad, Director General FICCI. Welcome to all of you. Bhanumurthy, yes. Is this phenomenon, what we have seen, the lowest, WPI in 5 years, and CPI is also coming down, is this something which is part of a global phenomenon, or is it a local phenomenon?
No, if you look at the past 6 months, I really cannot find a policy which actually addressed for reduction in the inflation rate, except for stagnancy in the monetary policy stance. Even there, we did see some kind of loosening of liquidity measures like SLR. But the reason why the inflation has come down clearly shows that the decline in the pressure of the international oil prices, where we have seen the petroleum prices have been brought down for the last 2 months.
Right.
And also we have not seen a hike in the diesel prices till now. So we might see a decline.
Apart from that 50 paise hike every
even
month.
That is stopped. There is no further increase, and
right.
Now we are hoping for a reduction tonight. So if all these things actually shows that the international commodity prices, the subdued international commodity prices seems to be showing up in our CPI numbers. But WPI, I really don't know. Actually, the WPI is something which policymakers are not really looking at. So one needs to really discount the WPI numbers.
It's no more an indicator or a parameter.
Right.
Surajit, it's very interesting. I was reading today. Just today, when we're talking of the lowest, WPI has come down, lowest inflation in so many years and things like that. Same story was, I see that in UK also there has been a similar drop in inflation rate. Is there a connection with what's happening, say in UK or even in Nigeria they're talking about? So, is it a global phenomenon? How do you connect this?
No, I don't think that the inflation story in India can be one-to-one, has a one-to-one correspondence with what's happening in the rest of the world. But I think that if you look at the past 8 to 9 years in which you have had this food inflation in particular driving an overall inflation rate, in that 8 to 9 year period, there have been episodes in the past also where for a short period of time, inflation rates have dipped.
Right.
Because what we're talking about is a dipping in the inflation rate, not a decline in prices.
Right.
Only a dipping in the rate at which the prices are increasing.
Right.
So we have witnessed such dips in the past also. But they have proved to be short-lived. And the longer-term story has been sustained process of increase in prices.
Right.
So I wouldn't kind of jump to a conclusion that because of this particular figure that has come now, that the inflation story in India is over, because I don't think that the fundamental problems which have underlain both the inflation as well as the other sets of problems that the economy has been facing have been really addressed. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that the inflation is only one indicator of the state of the economy. The other indicators that one is seeing are actually pretty bad. What we are seeing is that as far as industrial production is concerned, right. There's small signs of some revival in the first quarter. The subsequent first 2 months of the second quarter, it has gone into the negative range again. You look at the current account situation, again there's a moderation of exports.
It dipped quite a bit.
And a huge increase in imports of gold, not imports which are feeding into expanded industrial production. IIP data is showing also that investment, which again in the first quarter seemed to be slightly going up, has gone because capital goods growth rates are negative in the negative range. Consumer goods growth rates are also in the negative range. So it's possible that what you're seeing as a dip in the inflation rate is actually reflecting a process of compression and slowing down of growth of the economy rather than a real addressing of the problems.
Okay, that's interesting. Dr. Arbind Prasad, would you agree with that? And you think that this is something which can spur the industry in this country for more investments? Do you think FDIs will come in because of this? Or do you think, as my other two panelists are saying, that the real fundamentals have not been addressed?
No, as the other panelist has pointed out, that other indicators have not been extremely good, particularly index of industrial production, investment in capital, consumer goods. So what is required now hereafter, but what I don't agree is that the inflation going down is a phenomena which I would say over the months. It has both the commodity price, fuel price, which has gone down, and also some of the measures government took to increase the food supply. So what is required hereafter, that Reserve Bank now reduces the interest, which will lead to the investment, increased investment in house and also consumer goods purchases. Consumer goods the growth has gone down by 9 to 10%. There has been decline in capital goods investment. So there is a need now. Activities lie one at RBI level to reduce the interest rate. So there is an increased investment, increased purchases of consumer goods, and housing sector, the capital goods, the consumer goods, that will really give the boost to the economy and which is required. And also the government, which has launched as part of the Make in India launch, to ease of doing business and follow up subsequent reforms, both to give higher growth rate and creation of employment. There is an effort on Jan Dhan scheme, access of finance. Now, ease of doing business will lead to a smaller entrepreneur coming in. So I think that a broader environment, because inflation always was the worry, and this is a very positive sign.
And you think that the government's, some of the measures which the government has taken has resulted in this dip?
Both the things. One, commodity market, particularly fuel price, and on food side, some of the measures government took in terms of free movement, APMC amendment in some part, additional supply, and several other measures to increase the food supply. Both of them have resulted in this, and RBI consistently high interest rate, which of course, as the panelist pointed out, has resulted in depression in the capital good investment, consumer goods buying. So this is the time now to look at the growth and giving the spur to the purchase by the consumers. And there is a need, in addition to the efforts being made by the government on policy issues, the interest rate has to be eased at this.
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, I'm sure that demand has already begun. Paranjoy? If we have to assume, as Dr. Arvind Prasad says, that there's some measures which the government seems to have taken which has resulted in this. So if we assume that, then this government, why is it that the previous government was not able to take these measures?
Firstly, I mean, you are assuming that the government has taken certain measures. Now, I do not see any of them. Mr. Arun Jaitley, the finance minister, he said it is heartening to note that we have been able to bring food inflation under control. We are confident that soon we will be able to achieve a low and stable inflation rate.
Right.
Now, this is what Mr. Arun Jaitley is claiming. I see as has been pointed out already, I think the single most important reason why inflation has come down is because international commodity prices, notably the price of crude oil, has come down. And India is importing 80% of our country's total requirements of crude oil. Has been pointed out, petrol prices are down, diesel prices are expected to come down further. So inflationary expectations. One point which nobody has touched on yet, which is important to note, that we are also seeing what statisticians call the base effect. If you compare the inflation rate in November last year and October last year, you will see that is one of the reasons why it was already at a very high level. The index was very high level. So that is one of the reasons why we are seeing a base effect. Now, given 2 or 3 points, one is that already has been pointed out, capital goods consumption is slowed down, index of industrial production is down. Let me add to that 2 other points. One is the monsoons have been patchy. whether drought, whether you want to, disagree or agree with definitions of what is drought. But the monsoons have been patchy. There have been floods in certain parts of the country. And we'll really know whether or not this is a sustainable phenomenon only from after December onwards, December, January. You must also remember this is the time when certain kinds of vegetables and high protein products, their prices tend to come down because of a seasonal effect. Right. As Surajit has already pointed out, what we are merely seeing is not a reduction in prices, but a slowing down of the rate of increase. Now, the other point, and this is something it's very good for India, that international prices are down, which nobody expected. Iraq is, is imploding. Syria, the war has been going on for years. Ukraine, the problems remain. Libya, the problems remain. OPEC has split down the middle, yes. But on account of a variety of reasons, including the increase in shale gas production in the US, international prices of crude oil are lower than what they've been in the last 2 years. And this has surprised more than a few people. But there is another side to the story. Yes, it's good for India. But the softening of the international crude oil prices also shows that the international economy, the world economy, is not in such a good shape. If you see the latest data that has been put out by the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, you are seeing large parts of Europe is still in recession, or the economic slowdown. The US economy hasn't gone up to the extent that's possible, and the same story in Japan, in Korea. So this could have an impact on our export performance, and that in turn could widen that or not narrow that current account deficit, which in turn could put pressure on the rupee. So all I'm saying, the picture is a mixed one. I think the governor of the Reserve Bank will wait to see whether this inflation rate is sustainable over more than, say, 2 or 3 months from now before taking a decision whether to soften interest rates or not. This is my understanding of the situation.
Bhanumurthy, you think that the Arbind, because the industry has already started saying that, bring the interest rates down now that the inflation is so low. Why there's no reason for you to keep
they have not stopped demanding for quite some time.
Quite some time, but now with today's headlines has given them much. Has spurred them further.
There is a genuine demand because IIP is slowing down and inflation rates are coming down. This is the kind of sign that it's giving to the industry that RBI should be able to do cut in interest rate any time. It's a fair demand. But my view is that, as Paranjoy already pointed out, is this decline in inflation is going to be a
sustainable
for the medium to long term. And the kind of factors he has already pointed out. In fact, this subdued international commodity prices was predicted in January itself. Last January itself. Somehow we could not really take that in our policy making process. And going forward,
why? Why do you think we didn't take it? Is that the failure of the government to have seen that? And
it's not necessary that every time government should be blamed, even the academicians. It is there in the public domain.
Look, tell me, how many people predicted that the price of Brent would go down to $80 a barrel?
It's not about the Brent alone.
Just one example.
Not just Brent about. If you look at the FAO projections in January, we always take... we are always bothered about what US growth is going to be next year. Like that, we should have bothered about food commodities also. Sure. So the FAO has already made this kind of projections in January. Somehow we could not take it. The point is, the bad monsoon is something which is really playing.
You think this is a bad monsoon? We can say we have gone through a bad monsoon. Or, as he was pointing out, patchy monsoon, because we have had floods somewhere, drought somewhere.
If you look at the area under production, the data, recent data, actually it has taken a huge hit.
Okay.
So it may be because of the volatility in the rainfall or patchy or whatever it is. The actual on-ground reality is that there is a sharp decline in the sown area. I think that's what we have the information. Given that the Kharif output is really going to take a big hit. That's what the predictions are. Maybe Rabi is going to be better. So until January, we are not going to be clear what is the behavior of the food inflation.
The figures of the Kharif, when will it be available?
January, am I right?
So if it's going to be available till January, then we really cannot say till January that this is something which is sustainable at this point of time.
Right. Right.
Is that what you're trying to
Yes,
say?
see, in the commodity exchanges also have some kind of information about, there are some kind of indications coming up in the futures market where the prices are firming up, particularly for some commodities. So, given all these indications, the high food inflation is still there for us. We have to wait and see for January.
Surajit, I would like to look at the RBI, because RBI has been at the focus, last several years there have been pressure on RBI to bring down the interest rates and things like that. But do you think that the policies adopted by the RBI in these last, say, couple of years has done the right thing, has helped in bringing down the inflation rate also?
I think that the policy approach, both in terms of monetary policy as well as fiscal policy, has rather than countered inflationary pressures, actually contributed to it. Because I don't
contributed to it.
Because I don't think that the inflationary problems in India are on account of excessive expenditure or excessive demand. It is not demand driven. If that is the case, then if you have various other bottlenecks in the economy in terms of production, infrastructure, your irrigation facilities, all of that, then when you are compressing expenditure or holding back expenditure in the name of controlling inflation, you are actually aggravating the problem rather than solving it. So, the neglect of agriculture you can't address unless you are willing to invest in agriculture. You cannot address the problem of bottlenecks in the supply chain unless you're willing to invest in it. Okay. So, if what you do as a policy is to restrict expenditure, then you don't solve that problem. In any case, if you have an economy where you have high food inflation levels, but it's an economy also where food consumption levels continue to be pretty low, then frankly speaking, curbing demand as a solution to that problem is only changing the problem rather than solving it.
Paranjoy?
I agree with what Surajit is saying. The point is, look,
no, because the RBI governors have been facing this tremendous pressure on them by the government and by the industry and things like that. But they have stuck to their...
See, because you have to wait, as has been pointed out by Mr. Bhanumurthy and Surajit, you will really know whether this low inflation rate is a sustainable trend only around late December, January. Till then, I think there would be a reason to wait and watch. Now, the government may say that, we are taking certain steps. But what are those steps? Okay, you might unload some stocks of rice and wheat from the food corporation. In any case, the food corporation has excess stocks. But it's up to the states. You say you want to change the way agricultural produce is marketed. But it's up to different state governments to amend the APMC Act, which is the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee Act. Now, it's all very fine to say we are going to take action against hoarders and black marketers. But at the end of the day, the Essential Commodities Act is an act that has to be implemented by state governments. So, it's not as simple a situation as we are to say that we are already on the way to achieving a low and a sort of stable, low inflation, stable pricing regime. It's early days. Now, there are other issues where he talks about compression of expenditure. Today, there is also a hue and cry that you are not releasing funds for, say, NREGA, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. Now, that is another form of withholding expenditure. Now, this is across the world, economists, and say Governor Raghuram Rajan, he has been critical of the US policy because he's saying you are tapering off your quantitative easing too fast, and that is not going to help the world economy. So, there are a series of complex factors why we have to wait and watch to see whether the economy will revive. And more importantly, it's not just an issue of food inflation. You have to have job creation. Whether that will happen in the foreseeable future, we will know.
Dr. Arbind Prasad, all panelists feel that we'll have to wait till December, January. And there are also analysts now writing that the RBI also will have to wait, will certainly wait till then, and it's not in a hurry to bring down interest rates. How do you think the industry will react to this?
No, in any case, the next review by the RBI has to happen in the early December. So, I don't think that the RBI will do anything before December.
So, the industry doesn't expect anything to happen before December?
No, but the point is very simple that in addition to, of course, inflation is a very complex subject. There is a commodity market, government efforts, and there is some kind of uncertainty there. But we have also seen there has been a long contraction on demand side, on capital investment side. And as the panelist was pointing out, ultimately it is about creation of employment. So this is the time where, and also government is giving an indication. Then isolation, reducing the interest rate would not have had a long effect. But where the government is making an effort for giving the boost to the growth, looking at the policy issues, this is the time where the interest rate could also contribute to a large extent to revive this growth and creation of employment.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Dr. Arbind Prasad. I'm told that you need to go now. Thanks for joining us. Bhanumurthy, one other thing is, now, we have all been talking this, you're saying that this is not enough. Now, what is it that you would expect the government to do to cash in on these low inflation rates?
Well, if you're really talking about food inflation, I'm completely with Paranjoy. I mean, I think it's largely falls in the state subject, There are many things the state governments can do in terms of reviving agriculture production or productivity for that matter.
Now, what is it that the center can do to help the states to spur this kind of thing?
Well, center, MSP is one which, I was just coming to that. If you look at, I've been talking about this Madhya Pradesh experience in the recent period. For the past 3 years, Madhya Pradesh agriculture is growing more than 20% on an average.
How is it happening?
And I was just asking them what exactly the changes that is being brought in. There are only 2 changes. One is the capital expenditure by the state government in the irrigation sector. That is one. The second is the incentive scheme, that is MSP plus. Whatever the central government fixes, CSCP fixes, the state government is adding little more to that. So these 2 simple measures actually deriving 20% plus average growth for the past 3 years. On the other hand, many states in the east, like for example UP or many other bigger states, they are declaring fiscal surpluses, budget surpluses in their budget. Why can't they invest in irrigation? I think irrigation is the only major area for the state governments to invest as part of the capital expenditure. So I think this largely needs to be dealt at the state level if you want to really look at the, food inflation.
I just want to add one point to what I agree with him entirely. It's also the kind of investments that you make in irrigation. And if you look at Madhya Pradesh and you look at other states, it's not the giant dams and the big, projects, the Narmada kind of project. It's been smaller projects.
Yes.
And let's also look at, let's appreciate that 60% of the cropped area of this country is still rain-fed.
Absolutely.
So it's really, if you had increased the proportion of the crop area.
Surajit, apart from agriculture, what is it that the government needs to do to spur growth now? Now that they can, if they can still talk of, when they're talking of low, when they're claiming that we will keep this low and low inflation and things like that, what else needs to be done to spur the economic growth? Now they're talking of 6.5%, GDP next year and things like that.
Well, in my opinion, the underlying cause of the slowdown in growth itself and also of the inflationary process and also of our current account problems is a fundamental imbalance in our growth trajectory, where the distribution of its benefits is extremely concentrated. And unless you are going to...
where?
In a small segment of the population, in the corporate sector, that large part of the benefits are concentrated there. If you have that kind of a scenario, then your growth process is inevitably going to face certain constraints or limits, both economic as well as political. And that's the kind of problem that we have run into. Now, if you are going to address that imbalance, and that's where the question of government policy, because government has to be willing to intervene in the process by which distribution happens. It cannot take a position that I leave it to the market and I will only facilitate.
So the more inclusive growth which we keep hearing about, but it has not happened.
Yes, and that requires increasing your tax mobilization effort.
Right.
You're strengthening your tax mobilization effort and be willing to spend on issues like irrigation, etc., and all of these areas that are
Paranjoy, I have a very quick question. Quick answer because we're running out of time. Do you expect investments to come in this kind of an atmosphere now, and or do you think that the investors will wait further?
You know, it's early days. Statements of intent are made, but how much of it actually gets translated into investments on the ground, you know, people wait and watch. You know, the interest rate is only one of the factors that that influence investments.
Right.
And then what are the kinds of investments that we are going to see? Are we going to see the kind of investments that create jobs? I mean, whether it be at home or whether it be abroad. I mean, the reason why people have not been investing are many. That includes the fact that we have a weak infrastructure, inadequate infrastructure.
All those things need to be addressed.
Yes, I mean, Indian industrialists and Indian entrepreneurs have been investing more outside India than within India, or rather than the inflows of FDI in the recent past.
Okay.
Will we be able to reverse that?
Very quickly, we can
quickly two things. I think if you want to revive the growth in this country, I think government has to step in and expand the public expenditure in infrastructure. They cannot really wait for the private sector to come up as part of the PPP.
I think on that note, we need to end. Where all my panelists agree that, you know, we'll have to wait and watch whether this low inflation regime is something which is sustainable. We'll wait for a few months before doing that. But as of now, it is some good news for the people. Thanks to all my guests, Professor Bhanumurthy, Surajit Mazumdar, Paranjoy and Dr. Arbind Prasad, who had joined us earlier. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in Big Picture same time tomorrow.